I want to talk about the concept of being a great steward. When we think about being a great steward, what does that mean? In the parable of the talents, we see that the master gives his servants resources, and the master expects the servants to use those resources wisely and to produce a profit. The master wants the servants to use those resources in a fruitful way. And so, likewise, in Genesis, God tells humanity to be fruitful and multiply. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Genesis 1, verse 28. And so God expects us to be fruitful. And in order for us to be fruitful, we have to be stewards. Think about farming. In order for a tree to be fruitful or to have a plentiful harvest, you need to steward that tree. In order for a tree to produce lots of fruits, the farmer needs to steward the tree. It's by stewarding it, by watering it, by providing sunlight, by putting fertilizer, does that tree grow. And so we see then the way we become fruitful in life is by stewarding what we have. And so we see that there's a cause and effect relationship between stewardship and fruitfulness. If you guys are being blessed by this video so far, subscribe to this channel to stay up to date when I post more videos like this. And so what does it mean to be a steward? What does that practically look like in our life? The meaning of the word steward is someone who thinks continually on how to produce a greater and greater profit. For example, we know some people who are always focusing on making more and more money. They are always stewards of their wealth. They try to think wisely on how they can grow and multiply their wealth. And so in our life, when God tells us to be a steward with what we have, God expects that whatever we have to grow it and to multiply it. And so everything we do in life should always be growing and multiplying. And that is depending on how well we steward it. Everything that we do in life, we should do it so we can grow and multiply something. We should not do anything in life wastefully. We should not do anything in life without a purpose. For example, going to the gym. You are being a steward of your body. You are being a steward of your health because through the process of going to the gym, you are improving your health. You are stewarding the area of your health and your health is becoming more and more fruitful. If you invest your money, then you are being a steward of your wealth because you're trying to compound and grow your wealth that you have. And so before we do anything, there's two questions we should always ask ourselves before we do something. Number one is that, am I stewarding something good in my life? What is this stewarding? Am I stewarding good seeds or am I stewarding weeds, which are bad seeds? The reason why is because, say you want to watch Netflix. What are you stewarding? You're not stewarding anything. You're not developing anything positive in your life. You're just wasting time. But for example, reading a book, you are stewarding your knowledge. You are stewarding your personal development. And so that's the first question. And the second question you should ask yourself is, what kind of returns do I expect from this action? For example, say you have an investment. This investment only grows 5% a year, while another investment grows 15% a year. If you were a better steward, if you were a wise steward, then you would invest your money in the investment that grows 15% compared to the one that's only 5%. Another concept is called opportunity cost. And the opportunity cost means that if I choose this opportunity, what other opportunities am I closing the door on? It's always a trade-off. You cannot do everything in life. And so same thing with our time. When we are stewards of our time, we should think about what is the opportunity cost, or how much growth is this action giving me, or how much return am I expecting to get from this action. For example, reading the Bible versus listening to a sermon. Both gives you a profit, but reading the Bible provides more profit than just listening to a sermon. So just to reiterate, the first question we should always ask before performing any action is, what am I stewarding in this action? Am I stewarding knowledge? Am I stewarding my attention? Am I stewarding my finances? Or am I not being a good steward of those things? And the second question is, how fruitful is this particular action? If you perform this action, then you're not able to perform all the other actions. In our day, you only have 24 hours. It's only a certain limited number of things you can do in a day. And so we need to ensure that the things that we do has the most high leverage or has the most benefit. Because if we do the things that are lower leverage in life, yes, it can pass the first question of, am I stewarding something from it? But the second question of, what returns are you expecting to get from this action may be low. Like the example I gave of the 5% and 15% investments. Yes, you can put all your money in the 5% investment, but if there's another investment that's returning 15% that is just as good as the 5%, then it is more wise for you to pick the 15% investment compared to the 5%, right? Because the 15% gives you more profit. It gives you more growth in life. And so when we think about life in this way, it gives us a clarity. It gives us a framework on how we should spend our time in life. For example, when I wake up first thing in the morning, what do? Do I spend time praying or do I immediately go and reach for my phone? We think that reaching for the phone is not a big deal, but we need to be a good steward of what we have, especially with our time. Our time is the most valuable resource that each of us have. And so if the first thing we do in the morning is reach for our phones, what kind of steward are we? We're not being a steward of the time. We're not being a steward of our attention. And so many people, when they hear this, they may say, oh, well, I need to have my breaks. Or that, oh, I just need to relax. I can't just live like a robot every day. I'm not telling you to live like a robot. I'm not telling you to be emotionless. I am telling you to be wise. I am telling you that you should be wise with your emotions. I'm not telling you that you're not allowed to have breaks. I'm telling you that you should be wise with how you have your breaks. For example, do you have to scroll on Instagram in order for you to take your break? Or is you having a break maybe you going outside, going on a walk? Or is you having a break maybe talking to your friend on the phone? There are more productive ways you can have a break than just scrolling on your phone mindlessly. The problem when people hear this is that they don't want to do this. They don't want to change. And the reason why is because they need stimulation continually. We live in a society that we have to be continually stimulated, that we always have to be experiencing something new in order for us to feel normal. But the moment we're not experiencing something new, for example, if the internet goes out or you don't have access to social media, we all feel like the world is crashing down. We have lost the ability to live simple lives. We have lost the ability to live life in simplicity and in quietness. Most people, when they even watch Instagram Reels, they watch at 2x speed. And so the number one skill we need to develop in order for us to be a good steward is the ability to not overly stimulate ourselves. For example, when you're doing the dishes, do you always have to listen to a podcast? Or when you go to the gym, do you always have to listen to music? We are always bombarding our brains with continual information or with continual things that we're not able to think straight. We are no longer able to live logically. And because of that, we are no longer stewards with what we have. We are now bound to our urges because we do not have the capacity to live simple lives. So let's no longer overly stimulate ourselves with worldly things, but with the things of the Spirit. The way we can do that is by subscribing to this channel to stay continually plugged in this ministry. I hope you guys were blessed and see you guys next time.